Hello everyone, and welcome to the lecture video for the sample database installation walkthrough. In this lecture, we're just going to be walking you through how to download and install the database that we're going to be using throughout the course. First thing you should know is in the previous lecture, it was just an article and that had the resource on where to actually download the file. So if you go to the previous lecture and check the resources for that lecture, you'll notice there was two files to download. One was a .png file and the other was a .zip file. The .png file is just a picture diagram of what the database looks like, and the DVD rental.zip file is the important one that contains the actual database, and that's from the previous lectures. So go ahead and check that out. You should have downloaded it, and keep track of the actual file path of where you downloaded it to. Next thing you want to note is if you're just a beginner and have never programmed before, then you definitely just want to watch this video in its entirety first and then go back and implement the instructions as you watch it a second time. There's going to be a few key commands that are a little complicated, nothing too crazy, but it might be better if you're just a beginner to watch the entire video first and then go back a second time to follow along as you implement the instructions. Last thing, we'll cover all the commands you see in this lecture and future lectures, so don't worry about fully memorizing all the commands as we type them out. So for instance, there may be a command where I say select everything from a certain table. Don't worry about memorizing that or learning it. That's just to check if the installation worked. So all the commands you're going to see in this lecture are just to check if everything's installed and working correctly. Again, that goes for the command lines and the SQL prompts. So don't worry about those. We're going to cover everything in future lectures. Everything you see here in this particular lecture, you just have to type out and copy it exactly as I'm putting it in, but don't worry about memorizing those particular commands because we'll go over everything later on in the future. Okay, with that being said, I want to go ahead and jump to a browser real quick so I can give you a little bit of background on the actual database we're using for this course. All right, so what I wanted to show you was the Wikipedia or wiki for the PostgreSQL. So if you go to wiki.postgres.org/wiki/sample_databases, you'll have this sample databases page, and the one we're using is based off of the MySQL's classic database, which is called Sakila. But for Postgres, they renamed it to Pagila. So just keep that in mind. And the reason we're choosing it is because this is probably by far the most common sample database used when instructing someone about SQL commands or any particular syntax of SQL or particular database which uses SQL. So that's why we're using it. That way you can use these skills and immediately just quickly transfer them to any other tutorials that use the Sakila database, which is by far the most common database used. So it's an extremely famous database. It's inspired by a DVD store. So if you went ahead and downloaded the .png file from the previous lecture, you'll notice you have this picture, and this image essentially shows what the database actually looks like as far as its relationships and its various tables. So we'll go over everything later on and tackle these tables one by one as we begin to learn SQL commands. But just keep in mind, if you ever need an overview of what all the tables are and what's actually going on from a bird's eye view of the entire database, you can reference that .png file. Okay, so once you get more advanced with SQL and PostgreSQL, you can check out these other sample databases to play around with. All right, so we have our DVD rental.zip file downloaded, and you have your .png file downloaded. What you're going to do is go ahead and go to the location where you saved that .zip file. Okay, so I went ahead and jumped to the location where I saved it. You'll notice it was a compressed zip file here. So what you had to do was right-click this and either use 7-zip or WinRAR, whatever your extraction program is, go ahead and extract it all here. And then you should either end up with a WinRAR file or some .tar file, but you should have extracted it to some other file. What you want to do is go ahead and remember wherever you saved it, what the path to that file was. So if you're in Windows, you can go up here, and if you click it, you'll see a path here. So here it's C program files PostgreSQL. So yours would probably be straight in downloads if you didn't move it anywhere. But I moved mine to PostgreSQL, so you can go ahead and follow this if you want. But after unzipping it, now I have my .tar file and I know its full file path location. That's going to be important because we'll reference this later on when we tell Postgres where to actually assemble the database from. Okay, so what we've done so far is you've downloaded the DVD rental.zip and you've unzipped it and gotten the tar file out or some sort of WinRAR file. So you've unzipped it and you're ready to go. Next thing you're going to want to do is go ahead and open up pgadmin. So go ahead and search for it. So I'll search for pgadmin and then I'll go ahead and open it up. All right, so now I have pgadmin and it looks a little something like this. Notice we don't have many commands available to us because we haven't really started anything. So the next thing I want you to do is go ahead and check out that you have PostgreSQL, whatever version you downloaded, and the localhost should match what you had during the installation. So in our case, it was 5432, which was the default. And if you go ahead and, click on that, you'll notice you have some properties start showing up, and you actually get some abilities here on the toolbar. So that's with a single click. What I want you to do now is go ahead and double click and then enter the password that you put in. Remember, that was your super user password that you had to memorize. You can go ahead and store the password in case you don't want to have to worry about it later on, and then click OK. It'll give you a warning about saving passwords. If you're the only one operating on the computer, that's totally fine. And since this is just a toy database, you should be totally fine. All right, so you went ahead and used your super user password. And we'll talk about super users later on, but that was the password that you had during the installation process. So put it in and just go ahead and check off that it remembers it so you don't have to constantly be putting it in. And now you'll see you have a tab on databases, and you'll see Postgres, and you also have table spaces and login roles. So continuing on with this, the next thing you're going to want to do is double click Postgres, and you'll see it expand. You'll have catalogs, event triggers, extensions, schemas. And if you expand schemas, you'll see public. And if you expand public, let's go ahead and make this a little bigger so you can view everything. You'll notice you start having tables, trigger functions, views, etc. So eventually what we want to do as we finish the database installation process is essentially fill out this with the DVD rental tables that we saw in that image. So right now everything's 0, which makes sense because we haven't actually created anything or populated anything. Next thing you're going to want to do is go ahead and open your command prompt. So if you go to search and say CMD, this is your command prompt. So you go ahead and open it up and it should look something like this. Now that we have our command prompt open, the next thing we're going to do is change the directory of the command prompt to the bin folder of PostgreSQL. So if I jump back here and go to PostgreSQL and click 9.5 bin, so this is where I want to be in my command prompt. So this is the path I want. C program files PostgreSQL 9.5 bin. And it should look really similar for you. Maybe a different version, 9.6 for using this in the future, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. So again, just keep that in mind. That's exactly what we're going to do right now as far as the command line we're going to change to, or the directory we're going to change to at the command line. So if I go ahead and bring back my command line, what I'm going to type in is CD, and that stands for change directory. So right now, if you notice, if I just take that out, I'm just under users in my username. I'm going to CD to change directory, and then go ahead and copy that line that you just had as far as the directory to the bin file. And you'll notice if I just showed you, but if I do Control V to paste, it's not going to work. So what you're going to want to do is right click and then do paste. All right. Then click enter, and now your command line is at the bin file. So again, what you're going to do is check up here, go to C program files PostgreSQL 9.5/bin, know where that directory is, and then go to your command line. And at your command line, what you're going to do is type cd for change directory, and then right click and paste in that entire file path. Okay, so just to review what we've done so far, you've downloaded that .zip file, you went ahead and unzipped it, now you have a WinRAR or a tar file, and then you went ahead, opened up your command prompt, which was cmd, and then you changed directory using cd to that bin file of PostgreSQL. All right, next thing we're going to do is hop back to pgadmin. Okay, so here I am at pgadmin, and what we're going to do is if you just collapse all this Postgres, so selecting Postgres, go ahead and click on here, which is execute arbitrary SQL queries. Click that, and you should get another window pop up that looks something like this. Let me go ahead and expand it so it looks a little cleaner. So now you have this, and what you're going to do is give a very basic SQL query. And we'll go over these exact queries later on, but for now, just go ahead and copy exactly as I type. And what I'm going to do is say create database DVD rental semicolon. And that's it. And then I'm going to go ahead and click here to execute the query. And then once it's done executing, you should see query returned successfully with no result in some amount of time. So that makes sense. It should return no result because right now all this is doing is creating the database. And just to reiterate, we will go over all these commands later on, but for right now, just go ahead and copy exactly as I'm typing to fully install everything. So we're just create space database, DVD rental, semicolon, and then go ahead and run and execute that query. Okay, so once you've run that, go ahead and minimize that. And if we go back here to databases or your pgadmin, go ahead and click refresh. And after you refreshed it, you should see your DVD rental database. Now keep in mind, you should have clicked and highlighted database and then click refresh. If you just highlight Postgres and click refresh, nothing's going to happen. So click databases and refresh, and you should see the DVD rental database. And if you expand it, you'll see schemas, public, and again, right now we have no tables or anything. So basically what we just did was created an empty database that has not been populated yet. The information that we're going to populate it with is contained in that zip file that we unzipped earlier. But so far all we've done is just you executed that SQL query, which was create space database DVD rental semicolon. Then you went back to pgadmin. So just go ahead and minimize that SQL query. Go back to pgadmin, click on databases, click refresh. And once you've done that, you should see that DVD rental. It'll have a little X on it, basically meaning that there's nothing there yet or you haven't clicked it yet. Okay, so now what we want to do is populate this. All right, so now the trickiest part that we're going to have to do is actually populate this with some tables. So go ahead and go back to your command prompt. I'll open it up right now. And at your command prompt, remember you should be in bin. What you're going to do is basically type out exactly what I'm typing out. You're going to say pg underscore restore space. So that stands for Postgres restore. So essentially what we're doing on a very basic level is restoring an old database. Next thing, what we're going to do is specify a user, and we're going to do that with dash uppercase U Postgres, so user is Postgres, and then another space, go dash D, which stands for database, and we're going to type in DVD rental, which was, remember that was the database we just created using that SQL query. And then finally what you have to do is put in the path of where your .tar file is. So let me go ahead and show you how to do that. So if we go back to Windows Explorer, here, remember I have PostgreSQL, I have this .tar file. So what I can go ahead and do is, if you want, you can go to Properties, and it will give you the location path. So that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is if just click up here. Remember, you can always just edit copy. Okay, so I have that. So I know where my .tar file is. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my command prompt. And now that I'm back on my command prompt, what I'm going to do is paste. So if you notice, I have -dvd space DVD rental, the file path, and I'm just going to add to it the DVD rental.tar. And I'm going to click enter. All right, so you probably noticed that I got an error here, and this is a common error. It'll say too many command line arguments. And the reason for that is because of the space between program and files here. So we're going to need to put some escape characters in order to make the PG_restore operate correctly. If you were just in download/dvdrental.tar, you probably didn't get this error, but the reason I show this error is because if you accidentally, or on purpose, placed your .tar file and zip file into a file path that ended up having some spaces in there, you may get some errors. So to fix that, what we're going to do is go ahead and put some escape characters for those spaces. So I'm going to just go up on my keypad, and that will restore all the lines that we just written out so I don't have to type them again. And what I want to do is take care of this space here. So one thing you could have done is with a backslash escape that particular character, but what we're going to do instead that's a little easier is go ahead and just encase this whole thing in quotes. So I put a double quote there, and lastly I'm going to put a double quote at the end. I'll click enter, and now you notice it's actually running and there's no error. So let me just go again and reiterate what we just did. So I said PG_restore space -u for user. So that's basically a minus sign, that dash, capital U, space Postgres, space -d or $D for the database. Remember, we created the DVD rental database. And then you're going to go ahead and put in the file path to your .tar file. If your file path had a space in it, so for example, program space files, you'll get an error. That error will be too many command line arguments. You won't get this error if you did everything correctly and just had it in downloads, so ignore this information if it's not applicable to you. But if you did get that error, you can either put an escape character here, which is just a backslash before files, or the easier way to do it is just encase everything in either single quotes or double quotes. So that entire file path here, put a double quote before C and a double quote after tar, then click enter, and everything should work. So now if you go back to PG admin and click refresh on DVD rental, boom, you'll notice now we have our tables here with the actor, the address, the category, city, etc. We have our views, trigger functions, and functions. So I know that was kind of a long and complicated process, so let's go ahead and just review everything we did. Alright, so for a very quick overview of everything we just did, you had to download the zip file for DVD rental, extract the .tar file from dvdrental.zip, open up pgadmin, and then go run that SQL query that we showed, which was create database DVD rental, semicolon. Then you had to open your command prompt. You could do that by searching cmd. You had to use cd to change directory to the Postgres bin folder, like we showed. And then you had to use the command PG_restore -u Postgres -d DVD rental, and then encapsulate in quotes the file path to your .tar file. All right. So I know that was really complicated and we kind of did a lot there. I promise it will get a lot easier in the future and we'll see much better ways of doing and creating this database and restoring databases from a particular source. But this was just the very basics as far as just getting everything installed and ready to go. We'll actually learn how to do all of this in a much better fashion in a couple of lectures in the future. Okay. Thanks, and feel free to ask any discussion questions in the forums in case you're lost or get stuck at any steps. Okay. Thanks, and I'll see you at the next lecture.